Well, welcome everybody. Today we're going to take a look at this Dodge Ram 2016 that has an air suspension fault. So this thing has an air suspension leveling system on it. The suspension light's on the dash. It's got a couple of codes in it, or a bunch of codes, which I'll get to in a second here. Now, the shop that was working on this thing did some work on it. It had a new air suspension module installed on it. It had a new compressor installed on it. They have apparently done a system fill. I think they filled it with air as opposed to nitrogen, which is nitrogen's what you're supposed to be using, but they didn't do that. And they still can't get the light to go out. Apparently it keeps setting the same codes. So they called us to come and take a look at it. And first thing we did was we went in, threw a scan tool on it, and had a bunch of codes in it. It had a code for the left rear ride height sensor. It had a vent control circuit problem. It had a calibration problem, which kind of makes sense with the codes in there. It won't go through the self leveling or the self calibration routine. And then it had another sensor code and an air temperature sensor code. Those two codes were stored, which means they were intermittent and definitely not there at the time that we looked at this vehicle. So that's basically the code list. We decided to pick on the left rear height sensor, and I'll go back to the codes here and show you why. We had a hard code for the left rear height sensor circuit. It had a short to battery or an open. It was an active code. So that means that the fault is there right now as we're looking at the vehicle. And it was, we made the decision then that we were going to go after that code. So this is the sort of the hookup we used to test the sensor. Now, if you take a look at the sensor is basically it's a potentiometer, sort of like a throttle position sensor or something like that for measuring height. It has a power circuit, a ground circuit, sensor return, sensor power, and then it has the actual signal circuit. Now, when we look at these, the power circuit is generally 5 volts, the ground is 0, and then the sensor signal generally changes with vehicle height, that kind of stuff. So this is the hookup that we used to go in and hook up our equipment for testing purposes, and we tested it right at the sensor. And when we did that, we found that all 3 wires on the sensor were at around 5 volts. Now, the blue trace here, which is the power circuit, was a little bit lower, but all of these readings are very, very high. So when you have a ground circuit that's at high voltage, that's a really good indicator that you've lost your ground. So we see that the sensor sitting at 5 volts, power sitting high, the signal is sitting high as well. So there's a lot of stuff here indicating that we've got a ground problem with this particular sensor. So what we did was we moved our equipment up to the module, and as we were kind of doing that, we went on the signal wire, and as we started to plug our equipment in, the signal wire started jumping up and down between about 0.3 volts and 5 volts. And as we're kind of pushing on the connector and stuff, we could make this thing go from a normal reading to a fault reading here. So very, very much looks like we've got a problem either with the new module or with the connector itself. So I think it's time to take a closer look at the module connector. So what we decided to do here was keep an eye on the code screens while we went to the connector and started wiggling it to see if we could get the codes to change basically from active to stored while we were wiggling the connector. This would kind of prove that the problem was in the connectors. So we've got a little video here showing you what that looks like on the vehicle.
Alright, so we have our air suspension control module under here. If I wiggle this connector here, just do that. You're able to get the codes to change on the screen.
So just keep an eye on the screen here. What we're doing here is flexing the connector, and you can see that the status of the codes are changing as we work this thing back and forth, which is a clear indicator that we've got a connection problem inside that connector. So bottom line on this one is the connector is no good. I suspect spread pins or something of that nature. We pulled the connector off, turned it over, took a good look at it, couldn't really see anything. So our recommendation to this customer was that he get a new connector and either repin it or repin the old connector. And yeah, that's what it's going to take to fix this one. So basically, wiring problem at the connector is what we're dealing with here. If you like this video, please let us know by following us or liking us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. And if you want access to more in-depth training videos, please visit our website at www.autoaide.ca. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video.